All right, we've got regional finals. We've got more player movement, players going in and out of the portal. We've got the backyard basket brawl going on. We've got the NCAA proposing major changes. You thought this was going to be just a regular Wednesday? You thought we weren't going to have much to talk about on today's Morning Pit? We have a ton to talk about on today's Morning Pit. So let's jump into it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Seriously, you never know. You never know what news is going to come out. And you know, I wake up on Tuesday morning or whatever it is and think to myself, okay, you know, here's what we'll probably talk about for tomorrow's Morning Pit. Let's see what develops throughout the day. And it pretty much, when I woke up yesterday, I started going through the day, I thought, okay, this will pretty much just be about the Pitt West Virginia basketball game. That's what we're going to do. We're going to spend 20 minutes breaking down the Pitt West Virginia basketball game here for the Morning Pit. And then by the time we got to the end of the day, there was plenty more to talk about. And that's what we're going to do here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know the deal, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's our video channel. It's where we post all of our Morning Pit videos, these daily Morning Pit videos, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Programming note. Tonight's show is going to start at 8. We're going to go 8 to 9 instead of 8:30 to 9:30, so we're done in time for the backyard basket brawl. Is it annoying when I call it the backyard basket brawl? It's kind of annoying to say. So let's just call it the backyard brawl for basketball. Anyway, the Pitt West Virginia basketball game tonight in Morgantown, that starts at 9 o'clock. So we're going to go early for the live stream. We're going to go 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. as opposed to 8:30 to 9:30. But we do it every week, usually at 8:30, this week at 8. Every Wednesday night, me and Jim Hammett get together and talk a little Pitt sports. So we've always got that going on. Here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we'll have some post-game shows after some basketball games throughout the season and lots of other content, post-game press conferences, midweek interviews, all kinds of stuff, all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content, Morning Pitt videos, live streams, press conferences, interviews, any of those things. It's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And while you're at it, like this video. We'd appreciate it. For sure. Of course, you know the website. It's right there below. Don't click that. That's not a link. That's just an image. But what you can do is type those letters for Panther-Lair.com into your browser bar and go check out the website. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are on the message boards talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, let's jump into it. We'll start with tomorrow. We'll start with something going on tomorrow and kind of work our way backwards. We'll bounce around a bunch of different topics. But huge one tomorrow, huge game tomorrow at the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. Pitt volleyball in the regional semifinals, taking on Washington State. 2:30 is the tentative start time for that game. And of course, if Pitt wins against Washington State, they will face the winner of the early game, the noon game at the Fieldhouse, Louisville-Creighton. And you know what I think everyone is hoping for. I know what I'm hoping for is Pitt and Louisville to advance and face each other on Saturday in the regional finals to see who goes to the Final Four. It would be huge to have Pitt and Louisville in the Elite Eight on Saturday. Rematch of last year's Final Four. Giant match for Pitt. It was an epic match last year, an epic game last year when Pitt took on Louisville in the Final Four. To have these teams, I mean, ideally you would have these two teams face off in the Final Four again or in the national championship or something like that and keep building sort of the legend of this rivalry and keep building this, this series and the history between Pitt and Louisville. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to meet in the Elite Eight as long as Louisville takes care of Creighton, as long as Pitt takes care of Washington State in these Sweet 16 games tomorrow. They'll both advance, and it'll be Pitt-Louisville at the Fieldhouse in the Elite Eight. And if that happens, it is going to be one of the best environments for any sport in the city of Pittsburgh, probably this calendar year. It's going to be positively insane. And for all that people like to talk about sports in this town right now, and all the people like to, complain about this sport or moan about that sport or, bemoan the state of the Penguins or the Pirates or the Steelers, and they want to talk about Pitt football and where's Pitt basketball and all this stuff. Look, there is no better sports team in town right now than Pitt volleyball. And they are on a collision course with a team that has become a real rival in Louisville on Saturday. Now they have to take care of they have to beat Washington State first, and Louisville has to beat Creighton first. But by golly, would it be insane if these two teams get to meet up on Saturday, which they should. I mean, that's how it should work out. But it would just be tremendous. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, where these teams have played some epic games. Usually, I think over the last 2 years, they've split the regular season series and then met in the postseason each year. Louisville has gotten the better of those situations, but it's really developing a Pitt. I said this on Twitter a few weeks ago, like a Pitt UConn men's basketball early 2000s vibe of Pitt really being sort of the program on the rise, Louisville sort of being established, like UConn was sort of established as a college basketball program in those early, the early years of the 21st century in the Big East, and Pitt really sort of establishing itself with wins over UConn. I mean, that was a big part of building the legacy of the Pitt basketball program, and I think if Pitt can do it against Louisville on Saturday, if Pitt can end up in the Elite Eight against Louisville at the Fieldhouse and win that game to get to the Final Four and do it at home in front of a home crowd, it's going to be one of the best sporting events in the city of Pittsburgh in 2023. I mean, honestly, I don't think that's an exaggeration, or I don't think it's hyperbole. And a whole big portion of this city will ignore it, and a whole big portion of the sports media in this city will ignore it. Not all of them. I think the Post-Gazette's doing a great job covering volleyball right now. I think the Tribune Review's got some coverage on it. But some of our loudest voices in Pittsburgh sports will ignore it, even though it is one of the best things going in Pittsburgh sports right now. And so pretty excited to watch that one. Pretty excited to look forward to that one and see how the Panthers do against Washington State tomorrow, and hope for that Elite Eight rematch, the rematch of last year's Final Four in the Elite Eight this year on Saturday against Louisville. And also yesterday, I think it was, 7 Pitt players were named to the East Coast All-Region team. I'm going to bring it up because I don't want to get the verbiage wrong on what these women have accomplished. The East Coast All-Region team, named by the AVCA yesterday, 7 Pitt players named All-Region. Rachel Fairbanks, was named East Coast Region Player of the Year. Olivia Babcock, no surprise, the East Coast Region Freshman of the Year. Third time in the last 4 years that a Pitt player has been named the Player of the Year. Just remarkable season, continued remarkable season, and continued remarkable program building by Dan Fisher. Pitt volleyball is at the top of the heap. Somebody asked a couple weeks ago, what's the ranking of Pitt coaches right now? And I mean, Dan Fisher is the GOAT. He's number one. Everybody else is fighting for second place. Staying up on top of the hill, Pitt basketball tonight going down to Morgantown. Panthers will take on the Mountaineers. Pitt desperately needs this one. All right. They've lost 3 out of the last 4 since they moved into sort of major conference competition. They'll get Canisius on Saturday, which should be a win no matter what happens tonight. But they need to win one of these major conference, non-conference games. And this is the last one. This is the last opportunity. You've got 5 of these games. You've lost 3 out of the first 4. West Virginia is no better than Oregon State was. West Virginia doesn't look very good. Pitt needs to win this game. And I think there are a few keys that are going to go into it. I did think that Sunday's game against Clemson, disappointing as it was to come out on the losing end there, and I do think Clemson is pretty good. I think PJ Hall has a chance to be ACC Player of the Year. I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. I think Joe Girard is still a sniper like he was at Syracuse, and he was just draining shots on Sunday. And so I think Clemson's really good, and it's disappointing and discouraging because Pitt had a chance to win that game. But I think it's a credit to Pitt that they were able to battle back in and get close on winning that game. Pitt was down 15 with like 13 minutes to go. It would have been really easy to pack it in and walk away at that point, but they didn't. They kept fighting, they kept battling, and chipped away until they got it down to 2 points with just a few minutes left to play. And unfortunately, in the final 4 minutes, they went ice cold and didn't hit a single field goal. They had 6 possessions that didn't result in field goals. They cut the lead to 2, and then over the final 341, I think it was. They had 6 possessions. One of them ended with Federico missing 2 free throws. The next ended with a turnover and a pass from Blake Hinson to Federico. The next one ended with Ishmael Leggett missing a 3-pointer. The next 2 possessions, Bub Carrington ended up going to the free throw line. He made 1 out of 2 both times. And then the final possession, Carrington missed a 3-point shot. No offensive rebounds, no second possessions, just empty possessions. The rest of the way, and they end up losing by 9 despite having, it was 70-68. They ended up losing 79-70. Disappointing, but encouraging the way they fought back in it, encouraging the battle, and not hanging their heads and getting it down like they did. But one major issue in those final 341 or whatever it was the ball not going to Blake Hinson. I mean, Blake Hinson touched the ball, but he needed to be taking shots. He was on fire. 7 of 10 from the floor, 5 of 6 from 3, all in the second half. Or just in the second half, I should say. But he never really got an opportunity to shoot in those final 341, and that cost them the game. He was the guy the ball needed to go to. Jeff Capel even said it after the game that he thought the team understood who should get the ball and where the ball should be, but clearly they didn't get it, and he never called a timeout to emphasize the point. There are other things that need to improve, though. I mean, obviously they're not getting anything offensively out of the post right now, or out of the front court, I should say. Federico, Guillermo Diaz-Graham just not producing. Jorge Diaz-Graham, although he plays kind of a wing position, didn't play at all on Sunday against Clemson. There's big issues there. If you look at the 5 starters, Blake Hinson and Federico are 5 and 4 respectively in rebounds over the last 4 games. I think Ishmael Leggett or Zach Austin are like 1 and 2, and then Bub Carrington is 3 among the 5 starters in rebounds over the last 4 games. So you're not getting what you need offensively or in terms of rebounding out of the front court positions. And quite frankly, you're not getting much out of them defensively either. Federico's not playing the level of defense that he needs to play and that he's expected to play, and sort of what the coaches thought he would give them coming into this season. They're not getting it. In addition to the complete lack of offense, which you sort of assumed. But if you're not going to get any offense out of the center position, you better get defense and rebounding, and they're not getting that right now. So that's an issue. Bub Carrington, I still want to see him drive more. He drove more in the Clemson game than he had really up to that point this season. I think entering that game, I was looking at hoop math. Before the Clemson game, it was like 9.2% of his shots were coming at the rim. After the Clemson game, that number is up to 12%. So still well below what I would like it to be or what I think it should be personally for the season, but an improvement and, a sign that he did it more than he had been doing it in that Clemson game. And I think that's a positive step. It's something he needs to keep emphasizing. He's fast enough. I think he's fast enough. I think he's explosive enough to go to the basket, go to the rim. He just needs to do it. He needs a little bit more of Ishmael Leggett's mentality. Leggett needs to keep it up as well. And quite frankly, Bub Carrington needs a little bit more of Xavier Johnson's mentality. The good parts, and Trey McGowan's as well, of driving to the basket and drawing contact, finishing, or kicking out. I think he's pretty decent at kicking out. He did it a few times against Clemson. He needs to get better at finishing, and he needs to get better at drawing contact and just doing it. There were too many times, even on Sunday when he was going to the basket more, there were too many times that it looked like he could have gone, and he pulled up for a jump shot. And he can make those, and he made quite a few on Sunday, but he needs to get more. On hoop math, I think 53% of his field goal attempts are 2-point jumpers. No, excuse me. 35% of his field goal attempts are 2-point jumpers. 53% of his field goal attempts are 3-pointers. He can shoot, and he is a good pull-up shooter, and he's a good jump shooter, and that's what he does well. But I need him going to the basket. I think you have a higher probability of good things happening. I think when you look at the percentages of outcomes of what move or what action has the highest percentage of positive outcomes, it's going to the hoop. And so I need to see Bub Carrington do more of that. And I need to see him do it tonight. I need to see Ishmael Leggett continue to keep the pressure up. And I like how, obviously I like how Blake Hinson played against Clemson. He was great, and he needs to keep that up as well. We'll see if the depth on the bench goes back to 9 tonight. Jorge Diaz-Graham, like I said, didn't get any minutes against Clemson. I think with these last few non-conference games, I think you want to try and get as many minutes as you can out of Jorge Diaz-Graham, Will Jeffress, Jalen Lowe, and who am I forgetting? And Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I think you want to get as many minutes as you can out of those guys so they're ready to contribute those minutes once you get to ACC play. And, I don't think you sacrifice the West Virginia game tonight to get those guys minutes. Ideally, they can give you quality minutes in a win. We'll see if that's what comes to fruition. All right, yesterday, or it might have been Monday night. It might have been Monday night, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it yesterday because we talked a lot about Sam Okunlola and the transfer portal and NIL and all that kind of stuff. Dayon Hayes announced he's going to come back as a super senior. Hayes had 1 year of eligibility left. He was in the recruiting class of 2020, so he was on the roster that year, which allowed him to have that extra year, that COVID year, so he could be a super senior. He played all 4 years, 2020, 21, 22, and 23, but because he was on the roster in 2020, he had that extra year to use, and he said after the Boston College game that he intended to come back. And I mean, I took him largely at his word, but I think through the week, through the weeks since then, and certainly up to and including last week, I started, I don't want to say having my doubts, but I started questioning it a little bit. I wasn't sure really how certain it was that Dayon was going to return. Dayon, of course, was Pitt's, really their best pass rusher. He finished with 4 sacks. Sam Okunlola had 5. Shane Simon had 5. But Dayon Hayes led Pitt in pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, and he was tied for 6th among edge rushers in the ACC in pressures this past season. I think he had 42 over the course of 12 games. He didn't finish as well as he needed to, but he was getting into the backfield. He was pressuring the quarterback, and he was making an impact that way. So it's good to have him back. You need to develop young defensive ends. You're going to need to go to the portal to get young defensive ends. Even if Sam Okunlola came back, they needed to go to the portal to get defensive ends to fill out this roster. Now the need is even more severe. If they had lost Dayon Hayes, I don't know what they would do. Switch to a 3-4? No, you still need 2 defensive ends, but I guess you can use different body. You could play Elliott Donald as a defensive end in a 3-4 more than you would probably do it in a 4-3. But they're going to need to go to the portal, and we'll probably talk more about portal needs tomorrow on the Morning Pitt. But they're going to need to go. They need to get defensive ends out of the portal, even with Dayon Hayes coming back. You've got some young players. I think Jimmy Scott seemed promising. Nakai Johnson's still here and needs to take a big step forward heading into his 4th season. You have a couple freshmen that you signed last year, Antonio Kamen and Maverick Gracio, but that's it, man. That's unless I'm forgetting someone. Bam Brima, I guess, is still kind of lingering out there. We'll find out if he intends to come back for his extra year of eligibility or not. He was a class before Dayon Hayes, but he redshirted a year, so he could potentially come back for a 6th year in 2024, and I think they might need him just to fill out the bodies and fill out the numbers. Ideally, you would find a different, a transfer portal defensive end to start opposite Dayon Hayes, but they're going to need guys because they just don't have many. They have, what did I just list? Like 5 guys currently slated to come back? It's not good. That's not good. So it is good to get Dayon Hayes back. Just it stung to lose Sam Okunlola, largely for the future, but also for 2024. So getting Hayes back at least softens that blow a little bit, but you're going to need to recruit defensive ends, and you're going to need to go get young defensive ends out of the portal to help you for the future. I talked about that yesterday, about getting young guys out of the portal, because then you're going to have them for a few years. They've already transferred once, and so their options of movement are limited. So that's kind of the best way to lock up a roster for the next 3 years, is if you get some young transfers who can be a foundation for you over that span. All right, final thing, and just going back and forth about how to approach this. NCAA president announced yesterday, or sent a letter to schools yesterday, that The organization is considering a model that would allow schools basically to pay salaries, a minimum of $30,000 a year. But it could be more than that. It was, minimum, at least half of your eligible student athletes had to get it, and you could be in this group. And that, the schools that were sort of opting into that new subdivision could make their own rules on scholarship limits and this and that. And I think a lot of people took it for what it is. The further fracturing of college football, the further separation of the haves and the have-nots. And what I said and what I believe is I think it's an effort by the NCAA to keep the Big Ten and the SEC, particularly for football, under the NCAA's umbrella. Because ultimately, the Big Ten and the SEC were going to do something like this. The Big Ten and the SEC and whatever other power schools they could either entice or desire or invite were going to break away and form their own thing. And their own thing where the players were compensated, where there were no scholarship limits, whatever, I started thinking of lyrics to that old folk song, Big Rock Candy Mountain, or the cigarette trees and the whiskey rivers and the police dogs have rubber teeth and they hung the jerk who invented work. Remember that song? I was going to start, singing that as this magical utopia that the Big Ten and the SEC were going to create for themselves, and they still might. But I think that was the end game for those two leagues, was to get as big as they could with the programs they wanted and then break away, leave the NCAA altogether, at least for football, and create a completely separate structure. And I still think they probably have an eye on that. I think the NCAA is basically saying, here, let us create that separate structure for you with your own rules, and you guys can pretty much make up the rules. Just please still be part of the NCAA. Because if you lose that, you lose probably a whole lot of money, I would think. So to me, this looks like an effort to try to keep those conferences under the NCAA umbrella. We'll see if it's successful. But of course, more relevantly, the question is, what does it mean for Pitt? The number that's being thrown around is sort of, in order to pay this, you're probably going to need anywhere from $6 to $10 million per year. And it's not a total player salary. It's paid out of a trust or this or that, however they want to term it, however they want to, whatever kind of, semantics and mental gymnastics they want to jump through to call it something other than what it is. And they probably want to continue to call it something other than what it is, because if you actually call them employees, then you get into a whole new world of legal hang-ups and pensions and, insurance and contracts and all kinds of stuff. But if you call it this weird nebulous trust payments, maybe you can get around that. But how does it, what does it mean for Pitt if they now have to pay an extra $6 to $10 million to their student athletes, or at least, half of the eligible student athletes, whatever it is. And that seems to be the general estimates, anywhere from $6 to $10 million per year. Does Pitt have that money? Probably. They could probably find it, I would think. Does that mean they would have to stop spending money on other things? Probably. They would probably have to do that. Where do you siphon that money from? Where do you move money from to pay $6 to $10 million to your student athletes? Coaches' salaries? Facilities? Some of that money's already committed. Some of that money's already committed via contracts and whatnot. Some of that money's already committed to facilities projects. Say, well, you're getting this TV revenue check at $30 million a year, $40 million a year, whatever it is. You just have to take it out of that. Except I'm pretty sure the athletic department spends that money about as soon as it gets it. You know what I mean? I feel like it's like money comes in and money goes out. So at some point, they're going to have to tighten their belts. For a school like Pitt, is going to have to tighten its belt on some of this other spending in order to pay the student athletes. A school like Alabama might not have as much belt tightening because there might just be that much cash coming in addition to the ability to fundraise toward something like this. And so I think even if Pitt ends up in the, opting into this new subdivision, there's still going to be not at that level. There will still be a separation of hierarchy and tiers within that subdivision. If you want to say, well, you take money away from the coaching salaries to start paying the students, you pay the coaches a little bit less so you can pay the students something, and okay, that might work, but it's only going to further that gap where the schools at the top that have the resources to do so are going to keep paying their coaches ridiculous amounts and keep investing absurd amounts of money in facilities, and they're going to pay the student athletes as much as they possibly can because that $30,000 a year is a minimum, not a maximum. So to me, it's a way to keep the SEC and Big Ten in the fold. And then there's like 45 or 50 other Power 5 programs and the whole group of 5 structure that is left to say, what do we do here? How do we really want to spend? How are we really going to allocate our resources? What are we going to do? And there's one world where 20 or 30 of these schools of the SEC, Big Ten, that tier of schools, the higher resource schools, 20 or 30 sort of form their own thing. And then everybody else just sort of realigns and reorganizes into regional conferences. What about that? What a crazy idea that would be. But I don't know. You can go really far down the road with hypotheticals and scenarios. I don't know what'll actually happen. But I think this is just an effort to keep the SEC and Big Ten in the NCAA. We'll see if it works. All right, don't forget, 8 p.m. tonight, we have the live stream. It's not 8:30. It'll be at 8 p.m. to get you ready for the Pitt, West Virginia game. We'll be live before that with lots to talk about there. Tomorrow, we're going to have a special portal episode of the podcast of the Morning Pitt here. We're going to talk about some of Pitt's biggest needs in the portal. We'll have a mailbag on Friday, all the regular things. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then head over to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for watching today. We appreciate it. I hope you've had a great week so far. Hope you enjoy your Wednesday. Enjoy the game tonight, and we will catch up with you for the live stream tonight before the game, and then the Morning Pit tomorrow right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.